I always had in my mind that I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur one day. Yeah, I graduated from Brown in math and music, and those were my two big passions. I loved them both very much. Their goal was to be able to take 3D printers into outer space and fabricate whatever replacement parts they needed. I love, and I see this a lot in Greece, when the motivation for a startup is really organic. It's coming from the heart. 2 months earlier, in October '96, I gave birth to twin girls. And we brought them into the office every day with a nanny. And so I would split my time between them and running around. I was skeptical, like entrepreneurship in Greece in the middle of the economic crisis. Like, I just don't know about that. Where I finally come down is like, I want to feel like I'm creating value. And so that's the filter I use. I'm done with meetings where I'm not going to add any value. Faith in yourself that if you work hard enough, you're going to be able to get to the answer, to get to your goal.
Ευχαριστούμε τη Eurobank και την Grant Thornton που μέσα από το θεσμό των Growth Awards υποστήριξαν την παραγωγή του σημερινού επεισοδίου. Welcome to our latest Innovative Greeks Talks. We have the great pleasure of having with us today Marina Hatsopoulos. Before we do the intros, let me just first say, check out our new platform, IG at Work. You can find it at igwork.gr, and you'll find some of the best jobs available by top Greek companies, especially in the space of technology. So igwork.gr, make sure to check it out. It will get better and better every month. And of course, subscribe to our channel. Make sure you can see all the previous episodes and the next ones coming. So with no further ado, Marina, it was a great pleasure to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I'll say a few things about you. I hope I won't embarrass you by saying things that are exaggerated. But Marina has been, first of all, a great sort of inspiration and practical help for any Greeks looking to start a technology company, and especially those who have tried, and many of them have succeeded in penetrating the American market. Marina is based in Boston and has been a bit of a mother to countless Greek entrepreneurs when they arrive there for the very first time, either for university or as young entrepreneurs. Marina's background is quite remarkable. She launched Z Corporation back in 2001 after having graduated from Brown University doing pure mathematics and music, which is very unusual and very nice, and then went on to do engineering at MIT, her MSc. And Z Corporation was actually one of the first, we'll talk about it, the first, I would say, leader in 3D printing. So Marina has been both a mentor, an entrepreneur, I would say also a very active investor. She's on the board of companies that are of many different sizes, from relatively small and ambitious to quite established, all the way to helping Greek startups. So Marina, it's really a great pleasure to have you here. And I would be amiss not to mention the Hellenic Innovation Network, because this was actually one of the first organizations set up in the States, designed really to promote entrepreneurship and innovation from Greeks, whether they're here or anywhere else in the world. And this started actually before the whole thing became quite established and sexy. I think your relationship with MIT and many great Greeks who are there as professors or alumni have helped the work you do. And I'll start by just asking you, how did you first get involved with the technology space?
Oh, so my father was a technology entrepreneur. So I grew up with discussions about that at the dinner table. On Saturdays, my brother and I used to go to his work and run around and play on the chalkboards and steal candy from the secretary's desks. So that was just like part of life growing up. And I always had in my mind that I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur one day.
And just to mention that George Hatsopoulos, your father, for some people is considered the Greek Thomas Edison. That
was his dream.
That's how important George Hatsopoulos was. He was both an inventor of the artificial heart, if I'm not mistaken, but also a great entrepreneur. We'll leave this till the end of the interview, because I really do want to spend a little time getting younger people to know who your dad was, and I'll focus back to Marina now.
Okay.
And so you graduate from MIT.
First
give us your story a bit.
Sure. I graduated from Brown in math and music, and those were my two big passions. I loved them both very much. And I was kind of being pushed to continue my studies in math, but I wanted to try business. And so I went and worked at Chase on Wall Street. And and then from there, I wanted to get closer to an actual making of a physical product. And so I went and worked in M&A in a tech company in thermoelectron. And that was where I realized that I had a real hole in my education. And I went to MIT and got my master's in mechanical engineering. And my goal was not to be an engineer, but to speak the language, to manage engineers. And it opened up this whole world to me and generated a lot of curiosity in me in how the world works that I hadn't really had before. So it was an amazing experience. Not an easy one, but one I'm very glad I went through.
And Z grew out of this.
So then I actually spent a year looking for a job. I felt like the one missing, I kind of was building the blocks. What do I need to be a tech entrepreneur? So I had the finance piece from my work in the bank, and then I had the technology piece from MIT. And at the bank also was sort of a mini MBA training program. So I felt like I had the business side. What I was missing was management experience. So I was looking for a job in management, but nobody would give me a job because I had no experience. So I was caught in a catch-22. And after a year...
Is this late 90s?
This was in early 90s.
Early 90s.
After a year of total frustration, I went back to my thesis advisor at MIT and asked for his advice. And he suggested I go to the licensing office, where MIT takes technologies that have been invented by the professors and the students, and they look for individuals and companies to commercialize those technologies. And it was amazing because there were a dozen patented technologies that were going to change the world in different ways. And I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted. I wanted something with hardware that could be commercialized within a couple of years without a massive investment. I didn't want to try. One of the technologies I saw was desalination. I didn't want to spend my life in the Middle East. So quickly I kind of filtered through, and there were two that looked really interesting. But the first one was actually this 3D printing technology. It was a big project at MIT, 30 students working on it. Ellie Sachs was the professor in charge, and their goal was to be able to take 3D printers into outer space and fabricate whatever replacement parts they needed. So you just take a bag of powder and a 3D printer, so that way you don't have to keep inventory up there. But there were two engineers working on the project at MIT who were frustrated because they were designing their own print heads, which is a very difficult thing to do. And they turned the idea upside down and said, instead of designing a print head around a given material system, which was metals, let's design a material system around an off-the-shelf paper inkjet printhead. So they went to Staples and bought an HP inkjet printer. And we all know that if you leave your cornflakes out in the morning, they will turn rock hard by afternoon. So they used cornstarch, sugar, cellulose, powder, and they kind of fooled the printer to think it was printing on paper, but it was really printing on powder. And they demonstrated a proof of principle that this could work.
Wow. And I mean, this is like very early days.
Yeah.
I guess the genesis of 3D printing, essentially, right?
There were high-end rapid prototyping equipment at that time, so it was very expensive. It was $100,000 to over $1 million, using toxic materials in a special environment, requiring lots of training. So what we set out to do was to make something very inexpensive that could be operated in an office environment by anybody. You know, our concept was push button. We didn't totally achieve that, but that was our idea.
And you launched essentially one of the first companies. Maybe tell us about your experience of going back when you were where a lot of the people now asking for your advice and support were back then. How was that experience in the sort of, this was what, late 90s now?
94.
94, okay.
Yeah. Well, it was the end of 94, yeah. So, okay, so we set up in Kendall Square, which today is like the most innovative square mile on the planet. At that time, there was no place to eat lunch. Like there was a sub shop down the street. I mean, it was really pretty barren at that time. And there were...
For those who don't know, this is in Boston.
In Boston, yes, right outside of MIT. Four of us, all MIT engineers. The two guys who had been working on the project at MIT came over, and they had tremendous know-how because they had already been working on the project for several years. And they were really creative, out-of-the-box thinkers. So I came from a bank where I dressed up in a suit every day, showed up bright and early, read my newspaper, drank my coffee, and was very formal and professional. These guys were crazy. Like, they never wore shoes. The office was a disaster area because they were always experimenting with different things. There was powder all over the place. One of them was sleeping at the company. I only found that out later. So it was a real culture shock. But it was so exciting because they're the most creative thinkers imaginable.
And this is at a time where the culture of a startup and the quirkiness that you describe was really not known, I guess, anywhere outside probably specific states in the United States.
Right.
Not even across the country, and definitely not internationally. I mean, internationally, what you're describing in the 90s simply, didn't exist.
Right.
And so you go into this adventure, I guess, before it became in any way mainstream. And what happens next?
Well, luckily, so my husband was involved. He's a lot older, and he was involved strategically, which was a huge help to us. So two of us were on the business side, two were on the technical side, and we set out first to hire some engineers, mostly out of MIT, and build a functional prototype. Because what they had built at MIT, it proved the concept, but it required two humans to be standing, three computers, two humans, someone to pour powder, not something you could scale.
Yeah.
And so we set out to build a machine, and we did. And our goal, timeline was to build it within 2 years. And we did that. After year one, so we were in the middle of our development plan. And what we were doing was totally novel. Nobody else was talking about it. What we were going to do is to make a desktop 3D printer, something that could operate in an office environment, very fast, very cheap, very easy to use. And so we were all excited. We had patented technology. And at a trade show we went to after 1 year, the two large public companies, which had large, expensive equipment, came out and launched sort of their equivalent of office-compatible 3D printers. So this was crushing to us because we thought what we had was totally novel. And I don't think this is at all unusual, where entrepreneurs believe that it's their idea that is what makes them special. There's a lot more than just an idea to actually making a company, as you well know. And so we went to all the booths and started studying all the details of these technologies. The great thing about salespeople is they love to talk. And so we were very open about who we were, and they were very happy to show off their technology. And what we quickly learned was that our technology had some distinct advantages. It also had some disadvantages. But I think what's important to know is that you just have to have some very important advantages. One was we were 10 times faster. And so that's the difference between getting your part, let's say you're going to 3D print a mug, getting your part before lunch or even, in the next hour or two, versus getting it tomorrow or at the end of the week or next week. So significantly faster, significantly less expensive. So the material cost, let's say for that mug, might have been, $30 or something. So typically what had been going on until then was that people were making very expensive parts for, let's say, $1,000 a piece, and it would take a week to make. They would make one at the very end of the design cycle. And our concept was you can make multiple, make hundreds of them throughout the design cycle to iterate on your design and make a better design that the customers will like better. You can get customer feedback earlier. So anyway, our advantages were we were much faster, much less expensive, and pretty soon we could make parts in full color, which nobody else could do.
And looking back, do you think that 3D printing has lived up to its promise? I mean, it's an interesting case because you were there at conception pretty much, right? And now, many years later, I always wonder, and I have my own views on the stuff I've done.
Yeah.
But I'm always interested to ask entrepreneurs about their view on the stuff they've done. How has reality maybe diverged or differed from what you had imagined it would be like back then? Specifically on 3D printing.
Yeah. So I guess on the one hand, the part quality is far beyond what I had dreamed. So much better than what I thought. So the part quality of parts today with other technologies is just really astronomical. And the fact going into metal parts and all of that is really...
In fact, I just ordered my new car, and I'm a bit of a nerd with cars, and I realized that a large part of the engine is 3D printed now.
Yeah.
In new cars. Not every car still.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how far it's come.
It's really incredible. I think where it did not deliver, it still has not delivered, is in this concept we had of push button. Like, with your paper printer, well, I just bought a new paper printer and it's pretty amazing. Like, I can print from my phone without installing anything. It's just like I go to print and magically it sees that my printer is on the desk and it knows to send it there and it magically prints. Whereas 3D printing is still a very real process. You need to be trained. You need to know what you're doing. It's much more laborious than we had imagined it would be by now.
And I mean, where we are now on the topic of 3D printing, do you think that it's going to end up as a home device or probably not?
I probably not. I mean, my dream had always been that maybe it could be used for toys. Like, I loved Legos growing up. And I thought it would be so fun for kids to be able to learn CAD, design something in CAD, and then have it print out. I'm not sure that that's so doable in terms of ease of use and cost and all of that. The other discussions about home use, I think, are not really that useful. So people have talked about, you can replace your door handle when it breaks. I mean, who's going to go and redesign their door handle? And the material quality is just not going to be good. And you've got Amazon, which delivers same day. Like, I'm going to go to Amazon and get, my actual metal door handle from the manufacturer who made the original door handle. So I think some of that was a little hyped.
Yeah. And I'm curious, now and I've had the same experience of, you start your life as an entrepreneur and you end up then being an investor. And I'm interested in how you found this transition. I'll tell you about my experience, but let's start with yours. How was it transitioning from a hands-on start-upper, who's actually tried to create something that didn't previously exist even, and then going into, investments like Cynosure that you've done, or now your board position at Levitronics, both very successful, very large companies, but then many other smaller ones as well. How has this transition worked? And, I'd say pros and cons or thoughts around that?
So the good part is you don't have the weight of the world on your shoulders every day. I mean, I remember at Z Corp being so exhausted. I should mention, our plan was to launch within 2 years, which we did exactly 2 years. That was in December of 1996. 2 months earlier, in October 96, I gave birth to twin girls. And we brought them into the office every day with a nanny. And so I would split my time between them and running around. And then we had a son 18 months later, and then another son 3 years later. So it was mayhem. I was so tired all the time. So it was a huge relief. Like, I really was burnt out after 10 years and I needed to sell. So the good part about these other kinds of roles.
And you sold the company, when was that?
In 2005, after 10 years.
2005, 10 years. Well, 10 years is quite a while.
It was a while.
That doesn't seem a lot to perhaps the previous generation.
Yeah.
Who spend their entire lives in, working on their business, and then probably, the business continues with the family.
Right.
After their death, But I think, in this day and age, you could say that 10 years is quite a bit of time.
It was a long time. So I was burnt out. I was very happy to take a back seat, the board roles, investor roles. But as I spent more time in it, being sort of one step removed, I really do miss, I still to this day, I really miss the teamwork, the camaraderie of and these quirky, amazing, creative minds, working together towards a goal where we were each bringing something so different to the table, such different perspectives, experience, talents, interests. It's that sort of magic mix of everything. So I really do miss that a lot. And I miss just the creation, designing our first brochure, just all those for, writing the spreadsheet with our first budget, just everything. You're just starting with a blank sheet of paper. I really miss that a lot. And so I think that's why I've sort of migrated toward writing, because I love the blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people undervalue the sort of creative impulse that is so much part of entrepreneurship, especially I would say in Greece. Entrepreneurship was understood mostly as commerce, as trade.
Right.
So, you not manufacturing, I would say, but it's more a case of you trade a product and make a profit on the difference between the cost of buying it and the cost of selling it. Hence, you might be creative in terms of your sort of accounting or your selling kind of ability, but not to do with creation in the sense of a product creation.
Right.
And I think this has definitely changed in Greece.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
My father, his mother didn't want him to be an entrepreneur. She was embarrassed, Why would you do that?
I'll tell you an interesting fact. When I was graduating school back in 1991, none of my friends, including myself, wanted to be entrepreneurs. The role models attached, or rather, no, they were not role models, but the people involved in entrepreneurship back then were not particularly attractive to young people. They were really not role models, I would say. Now, some of them were, I guess, negative sort of examples, but even those who did their job perfectly well simply were not inspirational to most young people. So I think if you'd asked my class back in 91, how many people want to be entrepreneurs, you'd have very few people.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is I just gave a speech to a rather large school a few weeks ago, and out of curiosity, in a room of about 400 students, I asked them, can you raise your hands depending on the kind of what you're thinking you want to do in your life? And I was amazed that more than half of the students raised their hands wanting to become entrepreneurs.
That's amazing.
Which is an amazing statistic, like half of them.
Wow.
Now, and then I would say probably the rest, 2/3 were like high-ranking managers, and then a small proportion wanting to enter academia, research, but still, I would say 1 in 10 probably. And then I asked just for fun the question, who wants to be involved with public service and politics? Not a single hand.
Wow.
Not a single hand.
Is that right?
Yeah, not a single
That's a
hand.
big change.
It's a big change, and it has its positives for sure. It has some negatives as well.
It does, yeah.
We'll talk about that. But so going back to what we were discussing about, entrepreneurship and then transitioning into being an investor, my experience has been that there is a kind of joy in seeing other people succeed on their own strengths without you having to be involved in a way that is almost patronizing or controlling.
Yeah.
And I have this feeling that because a lot of people who become entrepreneurs are by nature control freaks.
Yeah. That's so true.
That is not a good thing to be, especially after a certain age. And you got to kind of probably stick to this dictum of, influence the things that can be influenced. Don't touch the things that you can't influence, and most important, be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Right. I found it personally very beneficial to take a step back and trust the people you invested in, and not have the impulse to sort of intervene as much as your instincts might tell you. So on a personal level, I found it really nice. The other point I found interesting was just the scalability of it.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
That as hard as you might try in a single company, yes, many good people can be built in a company that then will go on to create their own companies, and that's a wonderful thing, and that has happened in Greece. Like there are certain companies that have become multipliers. Like they've really cultivated a class of people who then went on to build their own companies. Hence, an ecosystem of close to zero in 10 years became an ecosystem of close to 10 billion, in terms of market sort of cap, which is great. But investing can do this also in an even grander scale.
That's true.
It has its benefits for sure.
It's also the difference between being an expert in something and allowing for the fact that you really don't know as much about what you're investing in, and sort of letting go, and that again, control issue, and learning, which is great. That's the fun part.
And learning.
I really love that.
I mean, I felt I learned a lot about myself and a lot about human nature when I was an entrepreneur. But I learned a lot more about new domains and sort of stretched my brain quite a bit as an investor.
Definitely.
Like almost going back to university in some ways.
Yeah. It's a lot
Every
of
wood
work.
pitch you hear these days is, if not a breakthrough in its own right, is certainly in a domain that in some ways changing the world.
Yeah.
Whether it's life sciences or generative AI or, you know, so many exciting things happening. And with that, I wanted to ask you, looking at the world today, you know, which domains or areas do you find most exciting personally as Marina? Like, not necessarily those that might objectively have the most impact in the world, but the things that make you tick, that you take a special interest in.
I mean, I studied mechanical engineering, so I have a soft spot, and it was very hard for us to raise money. So the VCs wouldn't invest until we were very far along, and we were profitable and growing fast. But in the early days, they wouldn't invest. So I have a soft spot for hardware companies because I think it's much harder for them to raise money. And they, you know, the economics are fundamentally different than software. A lot of times there isn't recurring, in our business there was, but in many hardware companies, there isn't really recurring revenue. And so I just love to see how things work mechanically. So for me, it's all about hardware. And I tend to focus on hardware.
And give me some examples of exciting stuff you've looked at. Or
Sure.
Not necessarily things you've invested in, but some exciting examples of hardware. Because I would agree with you that hardware is maybe hard done in some ways by the VC industry. Like, you know, hardware is seen as less scalable, as more trouble.
Exactly.
You know, more difficult.
Exactly.
Less exportable, you know, often regulatory issues come into play as well when you're manufacturing a physical good. But yeah.
So the two Greek ones come to mind. One of them, it has a Greek founder, Anodyne Nanotech, came out of Tufts, which is a drug delivery patch for delivering larger molecules. So it can, things that today require an injection, ideally one day could be done injected with a patch.
This I know well because we've invested in this company.
Yeah. So I mean, they're doing amazingly well.
It's one of those things that the problem with some of these ventures is that the result is kind of binary. You know, if they make it,
Yeah.
it's something that can be massive.
Yeah.
If they don't, it amounts to nothing.
Right.
And also it takes time and patience. I think a lot of people don't realize this, that not every business has the same kind of speed to maturity.
Right.
And sometimes some of the most interesting ones take a lot of time and patience to get there, you know.
The hardware, anything in hardware, from when you can imagine it, and this is with no leap of faith, no magic, but things that have been done before that you know, you've seen it, any lay person has seen it. From the day you imagine it till the day it's actually shippable to a third party who's going to use it on their own, it's a solid 2 years. And that's just like, really, 2 years from here to there? Where
At best.
And that's just engineering. That's not the creative, the wildly, you know, invention kind of stuff.
And you know, there's really no such thing as a beta. You know,
Yeah.
it's got to be complete.
Right.
And in some cases, especially in the life sciences area, you know, the approvals required. You know, the Food and Drug Administration and in other countries, the equivalent bodies are, you know, very strict and perhaps even a bit outdated, I would say, in how strict they are. They don't recognize the iterative process.
Yeah.
They need a finished, safe, 100% bulletproof thing, which takes time.
Yeah.
So you said Anodyne was one example, and another one?
The other one is RT Safe, based in Athens. So they 3D print using our technology, interestingly. This is totally random. I happened to come across them. They were the winners. I believe it was the first year of the MIT Enterprise
I was there, actually,
startup competition.
as a judge.
Yeah, I remember seeing it.
That's when we first met.
Yeah.
I was amazed by the scan of the brain.
Amazing.
Like, preparing surgeons for...
Exactly. So
maybe let's explain to our viewers in a nutshell.
Sure. So 3D printing a skull and then putting a gel inside the skull and hitting it with radiotherapy in preparation for radiotherapy for a tumor. And that way you can check that it's hitting exactly where it should be hitting. And they, you know, led by someone whose mother died of brain tumor, so has a real passion. I love, and I see this a lot in Greece, when the motivation for a startup is really organic. It's coming from the heart, as opposed to, you know, sometimes you meet, I'm sure you meet these entrepreneurs all the time where like, oh, I'm going to sell this to Google in 7 months and flip it and make $1 gajillion. Like, I just love it when it's really coming from a place of wanting to make the world better. Yeah, so a real scientist and making great strides over technology.
This is interesting what you bring up, because I feel that when I was starting off, even in the tech space, entrepreneurs were less interested about the product's impact in the world and more interested in the commercial success, right? And of course, it's wonderful to see a company being built, people getting employed, you know, the company growing, going to new markets. But there's almost like the last few years, a real kind of trend towards people wanting to build something that matters.
Yeah.
You know, that has substance, that can make a difference.
I think it's a generational thing.
It's probably a generational thing, because my generation, quite frankly, most people were after clicks, you know, or some like enterprise, you know, sort of contracts. And business was more of a game, a difficult game, but nevertheless a game. And I see exactly what you say. A lot of the people now coming to pitch to us have a very personal commitment to the end result of their product. You know, like guys at Anodyne, that people don't need to be in, you know, to face the needle countless times when
go
they
into
could
the
be
hospital.
and go into the hospital when they can be using a patch. You know, or like you say, RT scan. You know, a surgeon goes into the unknown. Into a person's brain. What if they could beforehand study the exact replica of that brain and know exactly where they're going before they actually do either, you know, any form of operation or anything like that. But I see this more and more. How do you find this to be the case in Boston as well, or in the States? Yeah,
definitely. I think it's an age issue. I think
explain. That's interesting.
I think younger people have a different sort of view of the world. I think they're less driven by sort of accumulation of wealth and objects. They're much more experiential. It's about the process. It's about, you know, give me a trip, don't give me a car, you know, that kind of thing. And I think they care more about the world as a whole than we did at that age. That's kind of what I see. I think
I find it very contradictory, actually. It puzzles me, because on the one hand, I see what you're saying, and I see it in the kind of business plans and pitches that I see. They make my job, quite frankly, a lot better. I mean, quite honestly, when I first started looking at businesses and it was yet another optimizing tool or yet another extra clicks, or, you know, at some point I did feel a bit like I was selling my soul to the devil. You know, because I had personally realized some of the negative effects of social media or of like overt materialism and all that. And now definitely there's a change. On the other hand, you know, you look around and like real experiences have been kind of substituted by Instagram moments, you know, and materialism is out of control, way out of control. Like if you look at the big, you know, sort of YouTubers, or, you know, you look at, you know, who's like a dominant, which are the dominant figures in sort of the amongst teenagers. And I'm not, you know, I'm not sure if this is yet another case of, let's call it a divided world, where some people are going in one direction, others are going in another direction, or is it something different? I'm not sure.
I don't know. And I think what you bring up about the impact of social media, we don't totally understand. I mean, kids are depressed, you know, so what's that all about? Well, how is, you know, so I'm not sure we totally understand that direct correlation.
One thing that obviously I'd like us to discuss, because it's so top of mind at the moment, and quite frankly, the discussion is just beginning. It was all obviously kind of spurred by ChatGPT. And, you know, as the use cases grow and as the technology improves, you know, GPT-4 pretty much aced all of the Ivy League exams, you know, and you know, the use cases again are remarkable. You know, a friend of mine before you came was here for lunch, and we were talking about ChatGPT, and he gave me this unbelievable example of a use case that I hadn't thought of. He was saying, actually, most of my friends are using it as a conversational tool, not the way I've used it so far. I mean, the way I've used it so far is ask a question, get an answer, instead of search. A far superior search. Now, listen to this. Like, this guy, my friend, is a huge Star Wars fan, and he's actually a mathematician from Cambridge, PhD. And a scientist, but has a huge passion for Star Wars. And he also likes writing. So he described to me a whole brainstorming session with ChatGPT on what a new Star Wars scenario could be. Literally.
So him with ChatGPT.
He was discussing like...
Back and forth?
Back and forth.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, back and forth. And he was saying, you know, how about we kill... Luke Skywalker. How about at the end of the Return of the Jedi, instead of sort of Luke forgiving his father, you know, his father kills him. And like the stuff this conversation produced was just unbelievable.
So
like we're talking George Lucas quality script writing out of an exchange between a creative person and an all-knowing machine that has read everything there is to know about Star Wars, from fan pages to alternative scenarios, everything you can imagine. So that's, you know, mind-blowing case study. The other one you like even more, which is, this is seriously unbelievable. So he has a friend, this friend of mine, who found herself in an abusive relationship, like with a guy who was a narcissist, charismatic, was with him for like, I don't know how long. And at some point she decided, okay, enough. But I want to break up with this guy in a way that doesn't create too much commotion in my life. So I'm going through a busy period in my life. I've got other things going on. I don't want this guy, you know, bringing havoc into my life. And she took advice from ChatGPT, if you can believe it. And she said to the machine, literally, look, I only want to talk to this guy via messages from now on. Only messages, only text messages. She gave the full background, and then every single message of his she responded to, it was not her. It was ChatGPT.
No.
Yes.
That's wild. Oh
It's
my
wild.
God.
And she had given directions. I don't want to infuriate him. I don't want to give him any hope
Yeah.
that we're ever going to be together again. I don't want this. I don't want that. This is the background of our relationship. This is where I'm at. Can you write the text for me? And ChatGPT wrote the text for her. And this went on for 2 months until the guy went silent. And, it worked, right? And this also helped her dissociate herself emotionally
I bet.
from the whole thing. So, here are 2 unbelievable use cases.
Yeah.
Now, why do I bring this up? What's your view of this unbelievable technology? Is it a singularity, you think?
I mean, I think it's just the next step. It's not a lot of the things that we find so remarkable. When you actually break it down, it's not that remarkable. Like someone was telling me how it built an itinerary for her trip to London. Well, I mean, we all do that by hand now, doing Google search. Google search is pretty amazing, but it's become part of our normal lives. And now we sort of have stopped at the wonder of it all. And so pulling that from various sources isn't really that magical. So there's an aspect to it which to me is like, okay, it's just the next step. But there's something someone said yesterday. I was in a group discussion and there was an MIT engineer there and we were all talking about the impact of this. Like, how would you feel if you read a beautiful poem and found out it was done by AI? Or
the unbelievable artwork,
right.
Dali produces.
Right, exactly. But one thing this MIT engineer said, which I thought was interesting, is he's troubled that as we advance these technologies, that all the input of the design of how we're going to create these new technologies and which directions we're going to take with them are all being driven by people with very high quantitative skills and perhaps lower on the EQ side, maybe more on the mind, less on the heart.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really intriguing notion and does have implications for where this all goes. That as it gets more and more advanced, are we going to be sort of disempowering the heart people who should also be involved in shaping these technologies as they go forward?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that troubles me is that it seems to me self-evident that many professions will suffer tremendously from this technology. I mean, there's been estimates that in the next 3 years, 300 million jobs will be lost. Now, I don't know how accurate this can possibly be. It's a number.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read it. But the bottom line is it makes sense to me that, for example, lawyers should be hit pretty bad.
Right.
Or architects should be hit pretty bad. Or customer support, for sure, would be hit super bad. Or, there's so many professions where there's no, there's no doubt that the machine, let's call it the machine, can do a better job. Now, the truth of the matter is, we talk about empathy and EQ, but in real life, how many people actually have true emotional intelligence and empathy, and especially in the context of, let's say, customer support?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some of the most brutal, non-human conversations with humans in my life, especially with anything to do with banks or even, customer support across the board. So you know what I mean. I'd rather be dealing with a supremely intelligent machine rather than a mindless, kind of fed up, pissed off customer support person, let's say. But
I have to share, I wrote a personal essay about my experience calling the Greek bank about setting up, getting some information for tax, so I wouldn't pay taxes twice. And it's like, no, you have to come into the bank, why in Greece? Like, I haven't stepped foot in a bank in the US in, I don't know, a quarter century. But then she's like, well, we need to verify your identity. So I'm like totally frustrated. And I go to hang out and she's like, by the way, how's your mother? How's your uncle? Like she totally knew who I was. She knew everything about my family. And it was just this dichotomy dealing in Greece where you've got this like insane bureaucracy with all these rules that make everything so difficult. And then you've got this human side. Like a banker in the US would never go down that path. Like, oh, how's your uncle doing? So when you come in May, we'll have the flowers out. Meanwhile, you know, there was a huge line of people waiting for this woman. And she and I are like gabbing about the flowers in May.
It's slightly insane, but
but it's this duality that you see in Greece.
It's cool as well, I guess. Yeah, we're insane in a cool way, in some ways. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line for me is like, quite often I think, where do you direct young people these days professionally? You know, I mean, do you would you really encourage someone to become a lawyer or an architect these days? You know, I have kids, I think about it.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer as to, well, I probably won't direct them anywhere they'll choose, but the question is, have you given this any thought? I mean, the world is going to probably radically change in the next few years.
Yeah, I think it will. I think it's hard to know until it evolves. I really believe in the creative mind. And I was just visiting a friend who is an architect for her own house. And it's the most phenomenal house that you've ever seen with these details. And, ChatGPT, after it sees that, could design another house with those elements, but it wouldn't have come up with those elements,
Possible. And let me, your mention of the bank and the Greek experience leads me into another topic, which is your experience, first of all, your motivations, beginning to help Greeks, the Hellenic Innovation Network, but also, the changes you've seen, good and bad. Just share with us your experience of Greece as someone who's never really lived here, for a prolonged period of time, other than holidays, I suspect, right?
Right. So I grew up, both my parents are from Greece, and I grew up with them speaking Greek in the home, and we came every summer. But I never lived here. And I had always said growing up, I would never do business in Greece. And I was invited to speak by MIT Enterprise Forum Greece for their inaugural event. Mm-hmm. And I was really kind of skeptical.
Which was when?
That was in 2014, I believe.
2014. And
I was skeptical, entrepreneurship in Greece in the middle of the economic crisis. I just don't know about that. And then, totally by chance, I was invited by the governor of Massachusetts to go on with a delegation to Israel. Mm-hmm. And Israel was not on my bucket list, but I went and it was amazing. First of all, seeing what was happening, Startup Nation was phenomenal. But also, I felt a deep connection with it. The culture of the people, the outdoor experience, the whole terrain, everything about it. It was this amazing amalgamation of the entrepreneurial world, which I knew so well from Boston, and my Greek self, my Greek identity. And it was kind of all mushed into one. And it was just this magical aha moment of wow, if they can do it here, why couldn't we do it in Greece? And I didn't realize it was already happening in Greece. So it's not like I invented this idea, but for me, that's when the aha moment took place. And I also saw one other thing, which was really interesting to me, which was to see the relationship between people living in Boston and the motherland in Israel. And I realized I had always had a really conflicted sense of my Greek identity because I called it the propaganda growing up. Everything started in Greece. We invented everything. Every word comes from the Greek, all of that. And I had kind of rebelled against that. And I'm American. And I realized this amazing relationship that can be had of having like one foot in each place. And it was really Israel that brought me back home to Greece. It makes me a little teary, actually. And so then the next year, thankfully, MIT Enterprise Forum Greece asked me again. And so I came and I met all these entrepreneurs. It was like 200 entrepreneurs. And I had no idea that this was happening in Greece. And, you know, as you say, like the dream had always been go work for the government. And suddenly there are like all these young kids who had been out of work, sleeping on mom's couch and had nothing better to do. They saw what was happening around the world and decided to do a startup. And instead of a team of 2, which you'd see in the US, they were a gang of 12 because nobody else had a job either. So you might as well like do something together. And I was so excited by what I saw, like, and just like the thought, and again, it's like the blank sheet of paper. Greece was decimated by the crisis. And it was like a house that's been torn down and now you could rebuild. And for me, that's the exciting moment, is like the blank sheet of paper, the demoed building that's just empty, and now you can start to build.
How has your experience been since you made that, let's call it, connection in your mind and re-engaged? Because, and I don't say this to flatter you, but a lot of people I've spoken to, including Nikos Waitakis or Stavros Papadopoulos or various people that I know or invested in, you know, they call you like the mother away from home in Boston in some ways of that community of Greeks. You know, this is important psychologically for a lot of these kids, or not even kids, like, you know they have someone who they can turn to if needed in Boston. That's not a small thing.
Well, it's not just me. It's a community.
No, when I say you, I mean the entire community you guys have built over there. Right? But it makes a big difference. Like, let me tell you this, for example. Out of, let's call it 8 or 9 investments I've made in companies that have this model of Greeks in the States with bringing some production here, and having like this, I feel, wonderful dual existence of Greece and America. For some reason, Europe hasn't worked that well. It's like more of a Greek-American thing rather than a Greek-European thing. Yeah. I would say that, out of the 8, well, 5 are in Boston.
That's great.
And 3 are in New York.
Yeah.
But it's not coincidental that Boston is a place where they feel more at home and they choose to go there.
I mean, we have a very rich community. MIT is like sort of the hub of it, the student community there, professors. But then, you know, we've built this community through Hellenic Innovation Network. So we have Michalis Bletsas at MIT Media Lab. We have Yorgos Zacharia, who is at Kayak, who has said, you know, if you're coming over to Boston, you need a desk, just come over to our offices. We're downtown. We'll help you out. Like, and it's just everyone kind of chipping in. When Mindspace, the student-run organization out of the Polytechnico, comes over on their trip to Boston, people put them up. You know, they don't pay for hotels. They just go and stay in people's homes. It's just amazing.
That's wonderful, right? I mean, it's like the best kind of community you can hope for, given the difficulties you're going to face when you're building a business. I mean, you know, I know how difficult it is, how many sacrifices you have to make, and it's difficult enough. Imagine being away from home.
Right.
In a place where, you know, some of them, the language is not even something that they possess 100%.
Right.
It's very difficult. Yet, America remains the land of opportunity. We'll go to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to cover the Greek thing first.
Yeah.
So, what your experience, obviously on a personal level, has been very gratifying.
Yeah, I have to tell you.
It gives you some substance.
It's been professional, and I love seeing the direction that Greece is going, and I love meeting all these young people and hearing what they're doing and learning about all this amazing research that's happening in Greece. So on a professional level, it's deeply gratifying. But I have to say, it's migrated to the personal very deeply. My Greek has gotten so much better. I can read and write with a lot of spelling mistakes.
Next time I'll interview you in Greek.
I don't know about that. I make a lot of mistakes. But I love that. And I've developed a lot of friendships in Greece. I always had a few friends, but I feel much more a part of the community than I did before. I was invited to a party a few weeks ago, and I didn't think I was going to know anyone. And I was like, I'll just stop in and say hi. And then I knew all these people. And it's, in the end, it's kind of a small world. And so
no, and you know, I think you're a good example of, you know, the Greeks always said how important our diaspora is, but we've never managed to properly connect to the diaspora other than receive, in some cases, their help and pity, you know. I think this has changed.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's becoming more of a mutually beneficial relationship in many ways, right? I think that someone in Boston or in New York honestly does have an issue staffing a development team over there. It makes a lot of sense for them to build a team here on the professional side at a lower cost, but also much higher loyalty and commitment, right? I mean, a Greek person working for a company that's going places in the US, it doesn't need to be Google or, you know, it's still, for Greek standards, something super important. This person will stay in the job.
Yep.
The equivalent American they're going to get in New York or in Boston has so many choices, you know, and might be a little more cynical about the personal commitment to the company, which is why average staying time these days, I was reading, is less than a year. It's less than a year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
As the Greeks would say, you're reading to γεφύρι της άρτας, you know. You're trying to build a company and people are leaving in less than a year. It's very difficult to build a company.
They're just up to speed and
And the other element, Marina, which I think you realize after a certain age, I'm going to be 50 in a few weeks, and, you know, truly good companies are also places that offer fulfilling lives to the people working there, you know. Otherwise, you go into the rat race of jumping ship every 2 years, you know, trying to maximize results. But and I think some of these companies that have a foot in Greece and a foot in the States probably also develop a pretty interesting and healthy psyche. You know? It's an interesting meeting of worlds, like some of the stuff that's really good about the US, like meritocracy, like speed, like ambition, like dreaming the impossible, are super important for Greeks to experience. But then some of the camaraderie, collaborative nature, the fanella, as we say in Greece, like playing for the team, are things that we, you know, we can bring to the table, and the two together can work miracles. I think they can work wonders. You know, I wanted to sort of ask you a question that I ask everyone. It's my standard question, and you can take as long as you want to think about it.
Okay.
But I ask everyone what they feel the purpose of life is for them. You know, it's, I guess, a simple question, but it's a very deep one.
So I've thought a lot about this because I was kind of lost after we sold the business and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I was like, you know, where is my North Star? What? And I went to writing just because I love writing. And so that's what
You've written a lot of stuff.
I've written a lot,
And very diverse.
Very diverse, I'm working on a novel right now, so we'll see how that turns out. But where I finally come down is like, I want to feel like I'm creating value. And so that's the filter I use. So when I was just on a call about something, and it was like an hour and a half phone call about something, and it was something to which I had no contribution to make. And so at a certain point I said, guys, I'm out of here. Like, good luck, be well, I support you. But like, I had nothing to add. So I'm done with meetings where I'm not going to add any value. Like, unless I'm going to learn, like I'll go to something where I'm learning. but I'm not going to go and sort of pretend add value just to be a body in the room. And so that's how I think about it. And that's how I think about my writing and when I'm helping entrepreneurs. And it's like this sort of leverage, and that was how Hellenic Innovation Network was born. I was already involved with what MIT Enterprise Forum Greece was doing here in Greece. But it just was like, wow, with so little effort, we could bring our community together in Boston and lend a helping hand to those coming over. And it's not like this is heavy lifting. It's really not. And it's fun. So I guess having fun is also part of it.
Yeah, and sometimes as you get older, one of the good things about getting older, which is generally we see more of these days more as a problem than a benefit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think is precisely what you say, that there is some wisdom that comes with it, and certain things that may come naturally or easily to you might be hugely beneficial to other people.
Yeah.
So like the usual sort of balance between effort, result,
exactly,
slightly changes as you grow older.
Yeah.
And that's a magical thing.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing when, it doesn't take as much pain and effort to get a result. But in fact, it might be a very pleasurable thing where other people get a lot of value from it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way, I think, to look at things. Yeah. I only do stuff where I truly add value, period.
Yeah.
The rest, I don't do, unless I learn.
Right.
So I'd like to end this interview with something that is very special to you and your family, but I think also very special to Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most Greeks these days classify and remember as great Greeks people like Aristoteles Onassis, Callas, probably Venizelos. But I would certainly argue that your father, George Hatsopoulos, is definitely among the greatest Greeks. Some of them call him like the Greek Thomas Edison. And I would like to say a few words about him. I think whoever's watching this episode today should look him up and read more about him. We'll have a little film at the end of this just to summarize his remarkable life. But in a nutshell, George Hatsopoulos was born in 1927 in Greece, went to Polytechnio, and then went to MIT, and is one of those unbelievable stories of the American dream, where he became an inventor, a professor, and an entrepreneur of a magnitude that is incredibly rare. So let's take it one by one. I mean, as an inventor, he is the inventor of the thermionic converter. I mean, he wrote the book on thermodynamics with sort of really a show-stopping impact in the world of engineering at the time. But beyond being one of the top professors at MIT, I mean, he also created one of the largest tech companies before the tech companies were even sort of known around the world, Thermoelectron, which employed, I believe, thousands of people. And, he's one of those characters where you rarely find such a diverse mix of personality in one person, right? Usually professors are solitary people, they are not usually at the same time as inventors capable of building a huge corporation and at the same time continuing to invent. So, I would like to end by hearing a few things about your father from yourself, and then allowing our audience to enjoy this wonderful film that you've put together.
So he was a dreamer, always had big visions, and he also was extremely intelligent. He was not bookish. So he wasn't the kind of person who read a lot. He was just really smart, and he had supreme faith. He worked really, really hard. And so he had supreme faith in his own ability to figure something out. So at Thermoelectron, if the accountants would say, well, this is how it's done, he would argue back, well, no, we should be able to do it this way. And it wasn't and any kind of expert in any dimension, he was willing to go head to head with them on their own turf because he had confidence in his own intellectual capacity to come up to speed to whatever it was they were discussing. And there's something as a child, sort of at the dinner table, very comforting about that, a sense that the world made sense, there was a world order, and that science and math were grounding, that there was an answer, that you can figure it out, and sort of a faith in yourself that if you work hard enough, you're going to be able to get to the answer, to get to your goal. And that's how he lived his life. He worked so hard all the time. He loved what he did. I mean, he loved what he did. He didn't have hobbies because he loved his work so much.
And lived to an old age.
He did.
And from what I understand, was a very happy man.
Very happy man, yeah.
So, I mean, how more blessed can you be than that? Yeah. And, a great role model, of which we have very few these days, even some of the great figures these days that are heroes like Elon Musk or, in my generation, Steve Jobs, they were people who have or are creating unbelievable things and changing the world, but maybe, are seriously lacking in terms of personal balance and happiness, right? And guys like George Hatsopoulos, I think, are great role models because life is really the trick in being able to combine huge creativity, professional fulfillment, but at the same time, personal happiness. And what the ancients say, eudaimonia, finding your best demons and being happy. So with that, Marina, I really want to thank you for everything that you're doing for our young kind of community of tech people spreading around the world, and for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Marina.
Being an entrepreneur is a bug. It's an affliction I always had in my life. I was born in Athens. My family, there's an extended family that is very close. And the reason this is particularly important for me is that that extended family has had a very important influence in what I've done in my life. In Athens, where we were living during the 4 years of occupation of Greece, I spent all my time in the library to learn more about who is this guy, Thomas Edison, that all my uncles said that I may be the next Thomas Edison. You have to understand that in Greece, in 1942, there was tremendous hunger. There were dead people found in the streets, dead from hunger mostly. There was also a lot of activity against the Nazis. I decided to do something that was very clearly punishable by death. There was a tremendous demand to hear news from the outside world. So I came up with the idea of building a radio, a shortwave radio, to hear BBC. And in the junkyard there was piles of old stuff. I would find vacuum tubes there, bring them back to my lab. The Germans were upstairs, and make radios. And that was my first enterprise. Very dangerous, but it was very successful. You see, you shouldn't lose sight of your purpose. What is your purpose? I want to build a company that is at least as good as the company that Thomas Edison did. The first thing that led to MIT was when I decided what country I wanted to build that company. When I wanted to pick my thesis, what I want to do is to work in preparing for my creation of my company based on my inventions. The invention that I came up with for that company is to convert heat into electricity by boiling off electrons. For the first time, MIT used its own money to support my thesis. MIT should be considered as co-founder of thermoelectron. The support they gave me was unbelievable. Unbelievable. All these MIT people that came to they believed in what we were doing. They believed in the whole idea of serving society by finding ways to solve problems. I turned the pages of the New York Times and found that the disease that killed more Americans every year is heart problems. I decided right there, that's our next business. We're gonna make an artificial heart. When I retired, we had built 23 companies, very successful companies. You know, my board kept asking me, the company is doing very well and you're working very hard. Why on top of it, you have to teach at MIT? But I like teaching. I have fun teaching. I really mean that. They paid me to teach at MIT, and every year I would donate all that pay back to MIT. You learn a subject more by teaching it than anything else, especially if you teach kids that ask the most unheard of questions that floor you. I did not do it because it was useful. I did it because it was fun. That's my goal, 80% fun. And I've achieved it over time many times. It's useful to set a certain direction you want to go. After you set the direction, don't focus in your goal. Focus in enjoying the ride.